Berserk is probably my favorite thing ever, which I guess shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone who clicked on this video. I got into Berserk right after the passing of the creator of Berserk, Kentaro Miura, and ever since then I've been completely obsessed with everything to do with the series. The first chapter of Berserk released in August 1989, which makes it one of the longest running stories ever told by a single person. When you have something that big running for that long, you're bound to have a ton of different topics to discuss, and what better way to celebrate the 35th anniversary of Berserk than going over the largest Berserk Iceberg with over 100 entries total. This chart covers conspiracies, obscure lore, the community and fanbase, rare merchandise, lost content, theories, and much, much more. This is the Ultimate Berserk Iceberg Explained. Berserk 1997 refers to the first official anime adaptation for Berserk, which released in 1997. It ran for 25 episodes, covering a bit of Volume 1, but mainly focusing on Volumes 4 to 13, or the Golden Age arc. The adaptation was animated by Studio Oriental Light and Magic, who had an incredibly low budget for the production, and it really showed as they would shy away from big action scenes in favor of more dialogue-heavy scenes. Despite the low budget, and it now being over 25 years old, it still looks pretty decent. I especially like the hand-painted versions that they would provide for some of the iconic panels, as they really look amazing. Berserk 97 is considered to be the best adaptation that Berserk has received so far, and ironically, it's also the adaptation that has the closest amount of hands-on work from Miura, as he personally approved every episode's script. Despite Miura's close attachment to the anime, it still wasn't one-to-one with the manga, as it left out a ton of important content and characters. A big example of this was the decision to not show or mention Skull Knight, which makes the ending very confusing. Anyways, in terms of adaptations, it was all downhill from here. The Berserk movie trilogy was created by Studio 4C, with all three movies releasing in 2012 to 2013. These three movies, yet again, were an adaptation of the Golden Age arc, or volumes 4 to 13. Most of the English voice actors made a return to reprise their roles from the original 1997 anime, which was for sure a good option as they killed it again in these three movies. The reception to the trilogy was pretty mixed for a few reasons. For one, Studio 4C decided to use a lot of CGI for the animation, which gives it a more uncanny feel. Fans were also upset because it had the same issues that the 97 anime had, where they cut a ton of important content. Instead of focusing on dialogue and character relations, they focused more on the action and battle scenes this time around, not realizing that Berserk needs both to have the impact that it has. Berserk 2016 is the third and most recent anime adaptation of Berserk, with the first season releasing in 2016 and the second releasing in 2017. It was animated this time around by Studio Gemba, and it finally covers something that isn't the Golden Age arc, covering volumes 16 to 29, which I say covering in big quotations because like every other adaptation, it leaves out a ton of content, except even more so in this adaptation. Berserk 2016 is easily considered the worst adaptation of Berserk for a plethora of reasons. I'm not even going to get into all the reasons, I'm just going to simply show you a scene from the anime. Yeah. Wrapping up the TV adaptations, Berserk the Memorial Edition is a remaster of sorts for the movie trilogy we discussed earlier and was created a year after Miura's passing as a memorial. The Memorial Edition released weekly in an episode format on Crunchyroll and reanimated many of the scenes that were CGI into some pretty good looking 2D animation. They also added a few new scenes that were missing in the original movies, which was pretty nice as well. I guess technically this is the most recent adaptation of Berserk. I don't know, I'm just gonna say it is so we can all move on from Berserk 2016. Guts' theme is one of, if not the song you think of when you think of Berserk. It was composed by Susumu Hirasawa, who scored all of the 1997 anime, and would pretty much become the face of Berserk music, but more on that later. Guts' theme would play during important developmental moments for Guts' character. While many would assume Guts' theme to be intense and violent, given the brutal nature of Berserk and Guts' character, it's actually very emotional and ambient. More recently, I've seen Guts' theme being used in emotional memes.
I am not gay. I have relationships with women. Sex with men.
And I got news for you. That means you're gay.
Kentaro Miura was born in Chiba, Japan on July 11, 1966. Ever since a young age, Miura was in an artist's environment, as both of his parents were artists, his father being a storyboard artist for commercials, and his mother being an art teacher. At the age of 18, Miura landed a job as an assistant for George Morikawa, who is the creator of Hajime no Ippo. Although Morikawa dismissed him pretty early on, stating there was nothing else he could teach that Miura did not already know. Miura worked for a few other manga artists during this time, and he had some pretty early concept art for a dark warrior with a large sword in his portfolio. Finally, in August 1989, Monthly Animal House would publish the first chapter of Berserk, which Miura continued to work on for over 30 years. Miura kept most of his private life hidden, all the way to the point where there's only a couple dozen photos of him throughout his life that are available to the public. Unfortunately, Kentaro Miura passed away in May 2021, but his legacy lives on as he still inspires thousands of artists around the world. Speaking of Miura's early life, the prototype is an early version of Berserk, which Miura created just a year before Berserk's final version of Chapter 1 was released. The prototype is very different from the final version of Berserk, despite only being a year apart from each other's releases. The only character who is in both is Guts, who is vastly different, having an eye patch over his lost eye and bearing the brand of sacrifice on his chest instead of his neck. Looking at his personality, he's also a bit more brash and cocky. He has a new set of motives as well for being the Black Swordsman, those being seeking the revenge against the Apostles for the killing of his mother. Yeah, I'm happy Miura decided to rethink that one, as it's pretty generic. This entry refers to the many hiatuses Berserk has gone on since its initial release. Many fans of Berserk that had been following since early on were understandably upset at the frequent hiatuses. We were never given a reason as to why there were so many breaks in between chapter releases, but we can assume it's because of Miura's physical and mental health, as making a series on the level of Berserk must be pretty difficult. The first thing you see when you first start the story of Berserk is something that has stirred up a bit of controversy over the years. The first few panels consist of Guts having sex with an apostle, who's actually the same woman apostle that kills Corcus during the eclipse. Guts then uses his hand cannon to kill the apostle. Obviously, this scene is used to show that Guts is willing to do whatever it takes to slay apostles, and not because he wanted to sleep with the apostle, but some people pointed out that this is technically Guts cheating on Casca. Miura stated in a few different interviews that while he was creating the Black Swordsman arc, he didn't have a lot of Guts' backstory figured out by then, and he didn't even have Casca in mind until he started the Golden Age arc. I really doubt he would have included the scene of Guts and the woman apostle if he had Casca in mind at the time. Susumu Hirasawa is the main composer for the original soundtrack of the 1997 anime. He worked a bit on the two other major adaptations as well, but nothing is as iconic as his work for the 97 anime. His work is still played today in Berserk culture and just internet culture in general, and when you think of Berserk music, you'll most likely think of his work. This entry refers to bloopers or outtakes from the original English dub of the 1997 anime. You can find an entire collection of these outtakes on YouTube. Here's a few of my favorites.
Listening, were you?
You weren't listening.
were you?
So, which one of you is Goku?
Look out! He's running into the bush!
Getting away!
Foxy!
Put your grasses on is a pretty old meme now in the Berserk community. In the opening theme song for the 1997 anime, titled Tell Me Why by the Pen Pals, there's a line that's commonly misheard because of the lead singer's accent. The line is, "Put your glasses on." However, this is what it sounds like in the song. Koji Mori was Miura's best friend since they were teenagers, and is probably the only other person than Miura that has a deep understanding of how the rest of Berserk is supposed to play out. Koji Mori has also worked on some of his own manga, such as his most popular series, Holy Land, and now he works on the continuation of Berserk, already putting out several chapters which fans have been torn on, but as of these last few chapters, I think Koji Mori has been killing it. Mori obviously has huge shoes to fill, but I think if him and Studio Gaga take their time, Berserk is in good hands. Donovan was a character from the first few chapters of the Golden Age arc. He was a mercenary in Gambino's crew, and was also the same man that Gambino sold Guts to for a night, when Guts was just very young. Even though he's only in the story for a few chapters, he's had big effects on Guts as a character, and several people continue to make memes about him, which has kept his relevancy alive. Chapter 83 is a lost chapter that occurred during the eclipse. The chapter was released in the Young Animal magazine, but was not included in the official volume releases. The reason it wasn't included is because Miura felt like it gave too much away about the secrets and concepts of the world of Berserk. The chapter takes place just as Griffith is being reborn as Femto, and in the chapter we see some of the background and forces behind the God Hand and how they function. The chapter is taken into account when discussing the lore of Berserk, but it's not officially canon. Berserk Musou, or often referred to in its English title, which is Berserk and the Band of the Hawk, is a game developed by Omega Force that was released for PlayStation and PC in 2017. It's basically a reskin of the Dynasty Warrior series, which if you're not familiar, it's a pretty big hack and slash game series. In this game in particular, you play out the events of the Golden Age arc all the way to the Falcon of the Millennium Empire arc, fighting through each battle with usually a boss at the end. The game got pretty meh reviews as the gameplay is very repetitive and it's kinda generic. I didn't know this, but apparently in the game, they hypersexualize Casca to a weird degree, even going as far to have alternate costumes of her in little clothing, which is just strange. Studio Gaga is a manga production studio created by the late Kentaro Miura. The studio was created and handpicked by Miura as a means to release more chapters of Berserk more frequently, because as we discussed before, hiatuses were something that plagued Berserk's production. After Miura's passing, Studio Gaga now works with Koji Mori to continue Berserk. No matter what adaptation of Berserk you experience, you'll often see the Dragon Slayer varying in length or size, not being very consistent between scenes or panels. This is often due to perspective shots, where it's hard to draw or animate Guts in a specific position without his sword looking like it's 4 feet long, or sometimes 14 feet long. The Dragon Slayer is on record to be around 70 inches or 177 centimeters, but it's whatever, I guess all you need to know is that it's massive. The theory that Skull Knight is King Geyserich is one of the oldest theories in the Berserk community. We learned pretty early on about all of their similarities, those being the fact that they both wear sets of skeletal armor, and the fact that Flora refers to Skull Knight as Your Highness. But in more recent chapters, it's pretty much been confirmed. In chapter 362, Guts sees something called a blood memory that is shown to him through the Berserker armor. A blood memory shows the previous wearer's dying moments. What Guts sees is described as the end of a foolish king and the beginning of a dead man stalking the endless night. The only thing not 100% confirming this theory is Skull Knight just straight up telling Guts,
"Hello, it is me, King Geyserich.
But this will probably never happen as Skull Knight only talks in cryptic riddles. Ending this layer on a high note, Schnoz is a creature or demon or I don't even know what he is, shown in chapter 215 of the manga. The community grew a huge liking to the little guy, as he's one of the only monsters in the series that isn't shown to be evil or threatening, and they named him Schnoz for pretty obvious reasons. He's shown only on one page, as he faces towards the Guts gang before running off after being attacked by the elves, never to be seen again. The biggest joke revolving around Schnoz is that he's actually the strongest character in Berserk, masterminding all of the events in the series, and that he actually spared Guts on that fateful day that they met. In an interview with Young Animal magazine, Mira mentioned that he bought the game Idolmaster. Idolmaster is a raising simulator or management game where you manage pop idols and try to raise their status. This is fine on its own, but he stated this around the same time that Berserk was going on one of its hiatuses, which led to a Japanese blog reporting that Mira went on this hiatus specifically to play Idolmaster. Berserk Chapter of the Holy Demon War is a game developed by Yuke's and released for the PlayStation 2 back in 2004. The game covers volumes 22 to 27 of the manga and also has some original content that was written by Mira himself. The combat animations, music, and visuals all look great, and it's considered by a majority of the fanbase to be the best Berserk game that we've gotten yet. None of the characters' ethnicities in Berserk are specified, as they don't have much to do with the story. The only set of characters that ethnicities truly matter are the Kushan, as they're a group of people from a land that isn't Midland. Some people in the Berserk community believe that Casca could be a part of the Kushan ethnicity based on her darker complexion and the fact that it's stated that she's from a village on the border of Midland, which could mean it was close to the Kushan border as well. Even if she is half Kushan or whatever, it's not going to matter for the rest of the story, as things like this don't play a big part in Berserk's story. There's a pretty funny entry coming up that talks once more about Casca's ethnicity though. This entry refers to the theory that the 5 God Hand members got their names from different pieces of media that Mira liked. Void's name comes from Frank Herbert's Destination Void, Ubik's name comes from Philip K. Dick's Ubik, Conrad's name comes from Roger Zalansky's And Call Me Conrad, Slan's name comes from A.E. Van Vaught's Slan. Femto's name isn't pinned to one thing, as some think it's a reference to the mathematical prefix, while some say it's a reference to the Norwegian word for 15, which by then is connected to the word 5, and as we know, Femto is the 5th member of the God Hand. If this theory is true, I wonder if we'll learn the names of the old God Hand that were briefly shown to us, and if their names will also be references to media that Mira could have possibly enjoyed. Obtained all the way back in Chapter 18, Guts has had his very own Behelit as a sort of mysterious ace in the hole for several hundred chapters now. Obviously, with an item like this being in the background for so long, many fan theories have appeared all over theorizing what Guts' Behelit will have to do with the story when it eventually comes into play. Personally, I think that this Behelit won't be used in a sacrificial manner that the Behelit is mainly used for, and I think Guts will use it to either upgrade the Dragon Slayer in some way, just like how Daddy Skull Knight uses Behelits in the same fashion, or Guts will use the Behelit to summon the God Hand for some reason, probably for the final showdown. There's several real-world locations that Mira had to have taken inspiration from while drawing some of the castles and other buildings throughout Berserk. Here's a few of the major ones that I found. Mark Raymer is a YouTuber who makes animation content. His most popular video is an adaptation of the Guts and Rosine fight from the Lost Children arc that's sitting at over 5 million views as of the time I'm writing this. The video is very well received, as the animation, music, and voice acting is all surprisingly great and looks like something a major studio would have put out. Something that also might contribute to it being so huge is the fact that we've never gotten an adaptation in any form to the Lost Children arc, which is such a shame because it's such a great arc. This entry refers to the fact that the Kushan are an actual tribe that existed in Central Asia from the early 1st century to the 4th century. The Kushan started as a tribe, but eventually became an empire with one of their great emperors being named Kanishka. I mean, this is like word for word, bar for bar at this point. It's not known as to why Miura modeled after this specific empire while writing Berserk. Maybe he just really took a liking to this lesson in his history class, I don't know. Once Elden Ring released to critical acclaim, many people online started to point out the clear Berserk inspiration and references that were present in the game. This led to people who were not familiar with Berserk to then look it up to see what it was all about. When these people, mostly hailing from Twitter or X, decided to do a very quick gloss over Berserk, they found out about the controversial scenes and panels, and instead of looking into why these scenes and panels are present in the story, they instead accuse Berserk of being a series that glorifies assault and violence. Many of the more twisted panels were being shared around by Twitter users, as they intended to tear down Berserk's reputation, and some users even went as far as making insane accusations about the then deceased Kentaro Miura, claiming he has fetishes for violence and assault and uses Berserk as an outlet for those fetishes. A ton of Berserk fans came to the aid of Berserk and tried to explain to the Twitter users that the manga uses these scenes as a means to further the story and are not there strictly for shock value or for glorification purposes. Thankfully, Twitter dropped this subject and they moved on to the next thing to hate, but I still have such a vivid memory of Berserk trending for a couple days and just being in disbelief as I read some of the tweets. Speaking of Elden Ring, Hidetaka Miyazaki, who was the president of From Software and the game director for the Dark Souls series, has stated several times that Berserk is a major source of inspiration for his games, which have now been coming out for several years. Elden Ring, which is From Software's latest game, came out a year after Miura's death, so many fans expected a memorial of some sorts to honor Miura. Well, many fans were happy when they found a monument that very closely resembles the Hill of Swords from Berserk. The great sword at the center of the monument looks a lot like the Dragon Slayer and has a message carved into it. The message reads, "The Siege of Castle Morn. A lone hero fights for his vengeance, only to fall at the hands of Lord Godfrey." The Berserk Official Guidebook is a pretty controversial book that was released in late 2018. The book contains info about the many settings, info about characters, stats, and a ton of more random facts about Berserk's world. This all sounds great as Berserk's a pretty open-ended story with a ton of unanswered questions. However, it's almost unanimously agreed upon that a ton of the content in the guidebook is just straight up false information. It also has some pretty strange segments that make fun of the more darker and serious moments in the story. Many people believe Miura couldn't have created this just because of how many inconsistencies there were, and they would be correct, as on the back of the guidebook, it credits the writers of the book to the editors of Berserk, while Miura's name is only there because he's credited as the creator of the series. As I mentioned earlier, Berserk has had a huge impact on From Software president Hidetaka Miyazaki, and it shows as all of his work has direct references or inspiration taken from Berserk. From character design, weapon and armor design, settings, monsters, items, and a ton more, you'll be able to see direct influence from Berserk and Miura himself. One of the go-to examples of this is the character of Artorias in the first Dark Souls game. He's very similar to Guts as they both wield a giant sword, both have a bum arm, both are associated with wolves, and Artorias even hits the same sword propel attack that Guts uses. I mean, this was also the cover of the DLC edition of Dark Souls 1. If you're looking for photos of Miura, you might find a lot of the same photos in circulation, as he was a man who didn't have a lot of photos of himself air out to the public. I remember reading that manga artists will try to keep their public appearances to the camera so low so that they aren't recognizable in public. A user on Reddit compiled all of the photos that are on the internet of Mira into one album, and I'm pretty sure it's like no joke, 26 pictures. There's now 4 separate occasions in Berserk where Casca falls into a body of water. This has sparked some jokes within the community, rightfully so because 4 times is kinda crazy. There's actually a line where Guts says, "Anytime she stands next to water, nothing good ever comes of it." This entry refers to the argument that some fans provide that the story should have started with the Golden Age arc and not the Black Swordsman arc. I guess if the story did start with the Golden Age arc, then things would have been a lot more shocking when the eclipse happened, as we already knew that something traumatic would happen to Guts that causes him to hate Griffith. I think the way the story did go was actually smart, as it's more satisfying to have your questions from the Black Swordsman arc slowly answered as the Golden Age arc unravels, but I can see both sides of the argument. r/Berserklejerk is a subreddit that's essentially just a place for memes and inside jokes pertaining to Berserk. While some jokes are actually funny, some are just low-effort jokes about messed up things that happened in the story. There's over 100,000 members as of the time I'm writing this, so it's pretty massive for an alternative subreddit to a series. Sword of the Berserk, Guts' Rage, is a game released for the Dreamcast all the way back in 1999. Like the Holy Demon War game for the PS2 that we covered earlier, it follows a side story created by Mira himself that's set between Volume 22 and Volume 23. The game was fairly well received. One thing I found cool was there's a feature that allows you to take non-linear paths to complete the game, which I think is pretty advanced for the time. The main antagonist of the game is an original antagonist created specifically for the game, and I actually found him to be pretty captivating and cool, despite his name being Ballsack. Studio Eclipse is a YouTube channel known for their animations that adapt an Attack on Titan fanfiction called Attack on Titan Requiem. Around late 2023, Studio Eclipse announced a massive project that would be a full animated adaptation of the Black Swordsman arc from Berserk. Tons of people were skeptical as Studio Eclipse has never put out anything of this size. As a matter of fact, Studio Eclipse still hasn't come through on their Attack on Titan project, as only trailers and short clips have been released, despite them having a Patreon with many supporters for it. Berserk fans, being as deprived as they are still hopeful as we haven't gotten a good Berserk adaptation in over a decade now. And the fact that it's the Black Swordsman arc is just even better because this arc has never been fully adapted. On May 17, 2024, Studio Eclipse dropped the official trailer for their adaptation, and it was massive. The trailer for the sub and the dub have a combined 6 million views as of the time I'm writing this. The 2D animation, sound, and voice acting all look and sound great, but some are still very skeptical given Studio Eclipse's track record of not fully releasing any of their promised projects. Studio Eclipse promises the project to be fully released in 2025, and I hope they silence the doubters, but only time will tell. Hey, Future Monomania here. They just got shut down, so yeah. This entry refers to one of the oldest Berserk theories that's been in circulation in the community for years now. The theory being that Skull Knight is actually just Guts from the future who somehow returned to aid present-day Guts. There's very little evidence for this theory, with the only 2 pieces of evidence really being the fact that Skull Knight always knows and appears when Guts is in serious trouble, and the fact that we know Skull Knight also wore the Berserker armor in the past before becoming the Skull Knight. This theory was absolutely dunked on when Elfhelm was introduced, as we now know a ton of more information on Skull Knight's past, like the fact he was a king, which Guts certainly wasn't. This entry refers to the very few figures and statues that are produced for Berserk. Usually if you go to any Target or Walmart or GameStop, you can find all sorts of figures or statues for many different anime series. However, Berserk is very hard to find these collectibles for. There's probably several reasons for the lack of Berserk collectibles, but there is a few brands that make Berserk figures, but they can be on the expensive end. I found this giant Zod pop-up parade figure that I bought in a local game store for only about $60, which was pretty cool though. While Miura never stated that he took inspiration from his philosophy, there's several similarities between the themes of Friedrich Nietzsche's philosophy and Berserk. Nietzsche believed that all humans should create their own meaning in life. He separated two types of people in his philosophy: those who cling to others, or slaves as he referred to them, and those who rely on themselves, or the masters as he referred to them. I don't know, this sounds like the philosophy of a certain giant sword-wielding hottie that we know. Check out this beautiful video after this one if you're more interested in all the similarities between Berserk and Nietzsche's philosophy, because there's a lot more than what I grazed over. This entry refers to some panels in the Golden Age arc where Guts' sword sheath makes it look like he has a cartoonish devil tail attached to him. No one knows if this was intentional or not, but if it is, I actually think that's really creative, as it only appears this way when he's fighting, giving the illusion that he's unhuman to his enemies. This entry refers to a segment from an interview with Miura where he stated that every core member of the original Band of the Hawk, besides Casca, are modeled after his friends from high school. During this statement, Miura said that Pippin is facially modeled after himself, which I guess I can kind of see it a little. This entry refers to the novel released back in 2017, Berserk, The Flame Dragon Knight, which is a novel about Grunbeld's backstory. The novel was not written by Miura, and is written by the same guy who was a writer for the 2016 anime, and it shows, as the dialogue and original characters are pretty awful. There's some original art Miura made for the novel, so I guess we got that out of it at least. Studio Taka is a YouTube channel most known for creating Berserk the Animated Manga, which is a series that goes chapter by chapter, animating panel by panel of the manga with full music and voice acting. Ironically, the best adaptation of Berserk is the manga itself. Arch is another YouTube channel that created an adaptation of Berserk, this time adapting what comes after the official 97 anime, even keeping the same 90s animation and style. They only have the first episode out right now, but that one episode is sitting at over 1 million views as of the time I'm writing this. Potato Casca is the nickname given to Casca by the community after the events of the eclipse. Casca, as we know, mentally regressed into a toddler-like state after what happened during the eclipse for quite a long time, and some people compared her character to a potato more than a person. Casca has since beaten the potato allegations after Elfhelm, but it is still argued whether or not it was lazy writing on Miura's part for him to make Casca be in this mental vegetative state. The Great Berserk Exhibition is an exhibition made in 2021 in Tokyo, Japan, showcasing a ton of Kentaro Miura's artwork and just being a celebration to the genius of Miura's work. There was also this giant Zod sculpture created for the event, which makes me really want to give him a hug. He just looks so fuzzy. Akatsuki wo Mate, I believe I'm saying that right, refers to the origins of this picture. The picture was spread around the community as it's a pretty wholesome page with good artwork. However, the art doesn't come from a single page of fan art, and it's actually a page from a hentai comic. If you stay to the very end of the video, I'll give you the source. While Berserk might not be an anime or manga that your mother has heard of, it's still insanely popular in the artistry world, having influence and references in all sorts of media around the world. This influence stretches from several other manga that came out in the past few decades, all the way to American video games and media. I've always wondered if this scene from Avengers Endgame was inspired by Berserk. If it is, that's crazy considering it was the highest grossing movie of all time at one point. Oh boy, we finally reached this one. Griffith did nothing wrong is a statement made by two different groups in the Berserk community. One group uses it as a joke or rage bait to upset others, and the other group says it because they actually believe that Griffith did nothing wrong. Yes, you heard that correctly. There are actual breathing, functioning humans that believe Griffith did nothing wrong and that his actions during the eclipse were justified. They use the argument that the Band of the Hawk offered to fight and die for Griffith's dream, so it's completely justified that he sacrificed them to obtain his dream. As for what he did to Casca, they either claim that Griffith and Femto are two different entities, or they claim that it was Griffith and he's aware of what he's doing, but he acted on instinct. Yeah. While we're on the topic of depraved people in the Berserk community, Casca enjoyed it as a statement made mostly by people using it as rage bait to troll people. There is, however, a very, very small group of losers who actually believe Casca enjoyed what happened to her during the eclipse. These people use the argument that Casca seems to be blushing in certain panels during the eclipse, but I don't think they're aware of how the body actually works. Luckily, the people who say Casca enjoyed it are very hard to find and most of the time are just trolling, but when you have a series with the themes of Berserk, you're bound to have outliers that say crazy things like this. Doranki is a manga series created by Kentaro Miura and Studio Gaga that released its first chapter in late 2019. One of the characters is named Kirta, and his design looks a lot like Young Guts' design in the early Golden Age arc. This entry refers to the speculation that the Dragon Slayer will get an upgrade or modification before the series is over. As of where the story is right now, Guts for sure needs a power-up that isn't the Berserker armor if he's gonna survive another fight with some of these new apostles. Obviously we don't want the series to be like a shonen, with a ton of sudden power-ups for the protagonist, but I think if they finally implemented the Behelit that Guts has had for 42 volumes now, and maybe use it as an upgrade for the Dragon Slayer, that would be very rewarding and have a good payoff for the amount of setup it's had. We do have some characters from Elfhelm that survived the destruction of Elfhelm, such as Hanar, who was the dwarven blacksmith, so if anyone's going to work on the Dragon Slayer, it would be him. SkullKnight.net was created in the year 2000 and is the oldest Berserk forum that's still active even to this day. There's a ton of resources for all things Berserk related, and some of the users have been posting for over 20 years now. Since Miura's passing, SkullKnight.net's reputation has sunk a ton, as a lot of users on the forum just make posts dunking on Koji Mori and the new Berserk being horrible and not what Miura envisioned. Apparently, the community on SkullKnight.net is also very prissy and believe themselves to be better than newer fans, some even banning you if you disagree with them or make a post they don't like. This is of course not the entire community, as I'm sure there's a ton of people over there that are good-hearted, but a lot of the Berserk community has been hating on SkullKnight.net for the last few years now. All in All is a YouTube channel most known for their Berserk animations, where they adapt the Lost Children arc. Their animation style is super unique as it's very crude and fast-paced. They have hundreds of thousands of views on their animations, but are still one of the more lesser-known Berserk animators on YouTube. Sweetheartist is another YouTube channel known for their Berserk animations. They started off making animations based on Guts fighting other characters from different media, kind of like a death battle type of thing, but as time went on, they progressed into full-on adaptations of Berserk, specifically adapting the Black Swordsman arc, which is 2 episodes in as of me writing this. This entry refers to another pretty old theory that states Guts is the son of Zod. The evidence backing this is that they sort of-ish resemble each other with the spiky black hair and slightly pointed ears, and the fact that they're both very physically strong. This theory not only doesn't have a lot of evidence to back it, but it just doesn't make any sense and wouldn't even be interesting if it was true, as it would just ruin the story for tons of people. Guts being secretly a superhuman would just throw out his entire character's theme and would be pretty awful. This theory can never be completely disproven though, because I'm 99% sure we'll never see Guts' actual father. In chapter 138, Mazgus tells Farnese and Serpico a story about an ancient nun who would seek out dying men and embrace them in her warmth before they passed on. This theory suggests that Slan is actually the ancient nun from that story. In the theory, it's stated that the nun, or human Slan in this case, possibly got sexual gratification from hugging the bodies of these men, which was punished very heavily due to her being a nun. As she was being punished by the church, her crimson Behelit would activate, and she would sacrifice the church to become a member of the God Hand. The time frame for this theory also works, because the nun is said to be ancient, and Slam must be pretty old because of the 216-year rule with the crimson Behelit. Forces is a song from the original soundtrack of the '97 anime, and is easily one of the most iconic songs from Berserk, and it also has the most alternative versions than any other track associated to the series. There are 6 total versions of the song, with the most recent coming from the Memorial edition of Berserk, which was pretty recent. This means they've been making renditions of Forces for over 25 years now. In Chapter 118, during the end of the Lost Children arc, a beaten-up Guts is attacked by evil spirits after the fight with Rosine. Puck finds Guts and fights off the spirits, but if you notice under the panel of Puck fighting the spirits, there'll be text reading Miyamura drawn. This is because Miura did not draw these panels, and it was instead Yuko Miyamura, who was the voice actress for Casca in the 1997 anime. Other than the Lost Chapter 83, which we covered earlier, there's one more thing that was removed by Miura for the official volume releases of Berserk. This being an entire page from Chapter 167. Unlike Chapter 83, we never got an explanation as to why Miura decided to remove this page. It's a little strange because it doesn't seem like anything insane is happening here, so maybe it was just for a style choice. This entry refers to the fact that just like the Kushans, Geyserik was a real historical figure from the 4th to 5th century. Geyserik in real life was the leader and warlord of the Vandals, ruling parts of the Mediterranean and North Africa. It's not confirmed why Miura chose Geyserik as inspiration for the character of Geyserik, and wow, it's just hitting me now that we may never learn things like this. In an interview, Miura stated that one of the reasons narratively on why he had Casca survive the events of the eclipse is because she serves as Guts' reminder to keep fighting against the Apostles. Not only that, but keeping Casca alive opens up the interesting tear between Guts' decisions on whether he should keep fighting this war or stop to take care of Casca. I think Miura made the right decision here. This entry refers to the long-time speculation behind Skull Knight and Void's feud. This started in Chapter 53, when in the Tower of Rebirth, Princess Charlotte tells the Griffith Rescue Squad about the legend of Geyserik, and how he constructed his capital, and then God sent 4 angels who appeared and destroyed the capital. Later in the Conviction arc, Mozgus mentions that King Geyserik imprisoned and tortured a sage inside the Tower of Conviction, until the 4 angels came to punish him. Many fans believe this sage was in fact Void, and after the 4 angels descended, they offered him to be the 5th angel or the 5th member of the God Hand before he sacrificed Geyserik's capital, which would explain all of the branded skulls at the bottom of the Tower of Rebirth. As we know, the tower sits on top of Geyserik's old capital. If this theory is true, I think Void didn't sacrifice Geyserik because he wouldn't have loved him in this case. I think that Void just sacrificed the entire capital, and by proxy, he sacrificed some people that Geyserik cares about. Perhaps like that one woman we were shown in the Blood Memory. This entry refers to a theory that there is a second God Hand residing on the left hand of God, completely different from the God Hand that we're familiar with. Since duality is such an important aspect of Berserk, and they make it clear that the God Hand that we know is the right hand of God, why isn't there a left hand of God that is possibly good instead of evil? I think we're a little too late into the story for this theory to come to fruition, but it's still an interesting thought. A pachinko is a Japanese slot machine that you can find in casinos and other places that you gamble in around Japan. In 2016, a Berserk-themed pachinko was created, following the release of the Berserk and the Band of the Hawk game that we covered earlier. These pachinko machines are ADHD incarnate, and show you some interesting image of some of the women characters in the series to keep you stimulated at all times. Gambling in Berserk? Bro, keep me away from this piece of technology. This very vague entry refers to any and all of the religious themes present throughout Berserk, and there are a lot of them, mostly taking influences from Hinduism and Christianity. The biggest piece of religious influence comes from Griffith, who serves as a Antichrist type character. He's a false savior who appears like an angel before people, despite him causing all of the immediate suffering in the world. There's also things like the God Hand and Apostles, which I don't even need to explain, and the entire Conviction arc itself is one giant religious themed arc. In chapter 278, Guts and his group of companions arrive at the Seahorse and board it to seek out Elfhelm. In chapter 342, they arrive at Elfhelm. Chapter 278 released in December 2007, and chapter 342 released in June 2016, meaning the trip on the boat took 8.5 years in real life. Obviously, it wasn't 60 chapters of boat life because there was an entire mini arc in between, but it's still insane when you think about the amount of time it took, as you could have started middle school when Guts boarded the boat and graduated high school before he got to Elfhelm. The boat trip is probably the weakest part in the story, so maybe Mira was just too busy playing Idolmaster to care about writing it. Tidal Wave was a Reddit user who would frequent the r/berserk and r/berserklejerk subreddits with one goal in mind. He would comment under any post involving Slan, saying the phrase, "I really want to Slan from Berserk." One day, Tidal Wave would delete his Reddit account out of nowhere, with some users claiming it was because he got sick of the joke, or it was because he claimed that he would delete his account if someone made art of him doing what he wanted to do with Slan. And someone on r/berserklejerk actually made art of this, and after him leaving one last comment, he disappeared into the aether. This entry refers to the belief that many fans have that every song Hirasawa has composed in his career is perfect for Berserk, even if it wasn't made for a Berserk adaptation. The tone and themes of Berserk is heard so well in all of his music, and his style is just so unique that even his non-Berserk stuff sounds very similar to the stuff he made for Berserk. After this video, go look up some of Hirasawa's songs that aren't Berserk related, and tell me whether or not you think they could fit in the next Berserk adaptation. Gotz von Berlichingen, sorry if I butchered that, was a noble from Germany during the 14th century. He was a mercenary who lost his right arm due to cannon fire while in battle. He had a prosthetic arm made for him that allowed him to still fight in battle. If this sounds like the inspiration for someone else you may know, then you're actually wrong, because Miura stated in an interview that he had no idea who Gotz was until after he created Guts. It's an insane coincidence given the similarities between the two, and because we know Miura likes to use real-world history for the inspiration of some of his characters. The original songs composed by Hirasawa for Berserk are not in Japanese or English, or any language for that matter. They're in a completely made-up language dubbed Hirasawanese. It does use modified words from many different languages to create it, but it was made up entirely for the Berserk soundtracks. The reason behind this was to give a more unique feel and atmosphere to the soundtrack behind Berserk. And it worked, it sounds great. I can't really discuss this entry to the full extent, but I'll try. Bad Horse is a horse from the Conviction arc who gets possessed by an evil spirit chasing Guts, which leaves him in a sort of crazed state. In this crazed state, he attempts to assault Farnese, who Guts has hostage at the time. In this moment, Guts is reminded of what happened to Casca during the eclipse and enters a rage, killing the horse and saving Farnese. This horse has been used in a ton of dark humor memes and has become a big meme for the same reason as someone like Donovan has. The design of Ludwig from the game Bloodborne was supposedly inspired by Bad Horse, which, yeah, I could see it. Side note real quick, Ludwig's theme goes hard as hell. This entry refers to the evolution of the art style present in Berserk. Miura wasn't afraid to experiment, and he was constantly evolving with the art as the series went on. From setting design to character design, and everything else in between, drastic changes have been made from Chapter 1 to now, or even Chapter 200 to now. When Chapter 341 was released, fans noticed the biggest change in art style Berserk has seen, as this is around the same time that Mira and Studio Gaga switched to digital art. I personally think the art in Berserk peaked at the start of the Falcon of the Millennium Empire arc, as the character design from this time is what I think of when I think of Berserk. Let me know what your guys' favorite period of art style was in Berserk. There's a ton of concept art available to find online for the 97 anime and the Golden Age arc movie trilogy. The concept art consists of facial expressions, full body sketches, height and size charts, and everything else relating to characters from the series. It's interesting to see the process the artists from these adaptations use to try and emulate Mira's style for an animation project. Sometimes we're left with really well done translations of art, whereas sometimes we're left with this. Chapter 364 is the last chapter in the series that was drawn by Kentaro Miura, as he unfortunately passed away shortly after finishing it. There was a good amount of time where people believed it to be the final chapter of Berserk, as it was months before Koji Mori announced that he would take over to finish Berserk. Some people in the community still consider this chapter to be the canonical ending of Berserk, as it was the last Miura-run chapter, but I don't know, I just can't get behind that idea because of the nature of the chapter. This entry refers to the perspective many fans have had that Berserk has drastically changed tone and isn't the same brutal dark fantasy it once was. These fans claim the series has turned into a more high fantasy story about companionship and love. They often make jokes about Guts having a JRPG squad that he travels with. I think saying Berserk hasn't been as brutal as it once was is just a crazy statement, given that in the last 2 arcs, we've seen some of the most brutal scenes in all of the manga. I do, however, think it is a fact that the series shied away from dark fantasy and is more of a high fantasy, especially with the introduction of Elfhelm. But I wouldn't say it's a bad thing or that it was sudden with no real introduction. This has always been the world of Berserk, and we've been teased with it since the start, we just haven't been shown it until recently. I think the tone also changed, because Guts' character also changed from what it once was. As Guts' arc develops and he becomes more lighter and open as a character, so does the settings and tone of the story. This entry refers to a Berserk animation made by a Russian YouTuber who I couldn't find the original YouTuber, so if anyone knows, please let me know. The animation is perfectly in style with the 97 anime, and it uses many clips from the 97 anime spliced in with its own original animated clips. His clips show Guts shaving his head, getting a tattoo from Godo, and working out. This animation is commonly used as motivation between gym bros who are locking in and starting their winter arc. A winter arc, for those unfamiliar, is when you spend all of winter working out your mind and body. It's associated with this self-discipline because winter is the coldest season of the year, I guess? It makes sense that they would use Guts for this, as he's just jacked, and he's kind of the embodiment of working hard. We know that most of the Band of the Hawk characters are modeled after Mira's high school friends, but who is Casca modeled after? Mira once stated in an interview that the influence behind the character Casca was what Mira's ideal woman would be. He stated darker-skinned warrior women with a feminine side are attractive to him, so he created Casca. Me too, Mira. Speaking of Casca, Casca's skin tone in the many adaptations have only seemed to get less and less accurate. In the 97 anime, we've seen probably the closest shade of her skin to the manga, but when you jump to the Golden Age movie trilogy, she seems to be a lot lighter, almost sharing the same skin tone as Guts in some scenes. In the 2016 anime, it's the worst we've seen it, where she's just essentially Irish at this point. Some people claim this to be whitewashing, which is when something or someone's skin tone and features are altered in favor of a more white appearance, while some people claim it's just poor lighting done by the studios who were animating these CGI-heavy adaptations. This one still hurts me to this day. Back in late 2022, when the Berserk Memorial Edition started to air, fans noticed a countdown started on the official Berserk Memorial Edition website. The countdown was pasted over a Behelit image that would slowly open as the countdown ticked down. Some people did the math and found out that the countdown was set to end when the last episode of the Memorial Edition was going to be released. This caused a ton of speculation on what the countdown was ticking down to. Many fans, including myself, thought this had to be an announcement for a new adaptation that was being created by Studio 4C. But nope, it was an announcement for the Blu-ray DVD release of the Memorial Edition. Thanks, guys. I actually have never seen this one before researching this video, but there was a live-action commercial that was made for the official release of Volume 40. The commercial has pen pals Tell Me Why playing in the background, as Guts walks around these green screen backgrounds, fighting these PS1 looking flying spirits. The commercial is super silly, but it's cute. Using data compiled from a few users from the Berserk subreddit and the SkullKnight.net forums, we now have a complete list of every breathing thing that Guts has slain that is shown in the manga. Guts has killed maybe 1,190 living things on screen in all of the manga. The reason I say maybe is because there's several cases where it's not shown if Guts killed something or if he just knocked it unconscious. It's insane to think that Mira has probably spent like a year of his total life drawing Guts killing something. I honestly can't think of a better way to spend your time though. This entry refers to the fact that Berserk is set in an alternate version of Europe. We already knew it was based on real-life medieval Europe, as the armor, weapons, and architecture is the same, but in chapter 307, when the world spiral tree emerges from Ganishka, we are able to see the world of Berserk almost from space, and most of the geography is the same as actual Europe. If we're looking at the middle of the impact from the world tree, it looks like Berserk takes place somewhere between Eastern Germany to Central Poland. This entry refers to the many different theories and predictions surrounding how the story of Berserk will end. I think given the unpredictable nature of Berserk's storytelling, we're not going to get the grand conclusion of a Guts vs. Griffith final showdown where Guts kills Griffith and all of the evil in the world just ceases to exist. I could spend an entire video talking about the ending predictions, but I'll share a couple of... Oh, wait, hold up. I just found the leak panel from the final chapter. Let me show y'all. Oh. This entry refers to the theory that Void is the first or original member of the God Hand. We already know Void is the supposed leader of the God Hand, as he's the one who essentially runs the appearances of the God Hand. He's the one who applies the brand of sacrifice during the eclipse, and I don't think it's coincidental that he's the thumb of the God Hand, which is the most important finger on the hand. Void also is the only member of the current God Hand to appear in the God Hand flashback from the blood memory that Guts sees in chapter 362. If this theory is true, that could mean killing Void could dismantle the God Hand or depower them significantly in some way. When a new chapter of Berserk is released, it can take months for Dark Horse to release an official English translation of the chapter. Obviously, English readers don't want to wait that long for a translation, so some good-hearted Berserk fans have done the job of translating from Japanese into English so that readers can enjoy new releases. This all sounds great, but a lot of the time fan translations are insanely inaccurate. Most of the time the inaccuracies will be in the form of misspelled names or items, but sometimes the fan translations will completely mix up characters and punctuation, which makes Berserk unreadable at times just because of how confusing it reads. You don't know. Resting in this comfortable place, without a care for the world you're about to pass from. Nobody, no human being, that don't know. This entry refers to the theory or speculation made by some people in the Berserk community that Casca knew she was pregnant after her and Guts' encounter in the woods. Some evidence to back this is that in some panels leading up to the eclipse, we could see Casca holding her stomach or lower abdomen, sometimes in slight tears or anxiety. I don't know if I support this all too much, given between the time of Guts and Casca having sex and the eclipse, only about a week or so has passed, so I'm not sure if she would be experiencing the symptoms of pregnancy that early, but I'm not a professional at all, so don't listen to me. This entry refers to the meaning of the number 216 and its use in the story of Berserk. The eclipse takes place once every 216 years, when a Crimson Behelit is activated by its owner, like what we saw with Griffith. It was unclear for a while why Miura chose this number specifically, but he cleared it up in an interview saying that he chose it because of its numerology. 216 is the cube of 6, meaning 6 times 6 times 6 is 216, and 666 is very fitting for the demonic nature of what takes place during the eclipse. We've seen Guts take revenge on a few of the apostles that were seen in the eclipse now, but one major apostle that we haven't seen Guts interact with since the eclipse is Borkov. Borkov is the demon who bit down on Guts' arm, which caused him to lose it. We've actually seen Borkov since the eclipse, as he's now a Lancer under Commander Locus in the new Band of the Hawk. I'm pretty sure a second meeting between them is inevitable at this point, and I really hope we get to see Gus use his prosthetic arm to kill Borkov, as that payoff would be amazing. Teresia was the daughter of the Slug Count all the way back in the Black Swordsman arc, who we haven't seen since Volume 3, which released over 30 years ago now. Some people in the community believe that Teresia should make a comeback so that Gus can confront the evil things he did and said to her during that time in his life, as a way to show his growth in a way. I personally think something like that would be too out of the ordinary for Berserk, and it isn't really needed. One other thing is that right at the last couple pages of the Black Swordsman arc, Teresia promised that one day she would find Guts and kill him, so it's pretty funny to think that Teresia could be out there with a giant sword of her own tracking down Guts. This entry refers to a blog post created by Reddit user AzerPark, who was a former mod from the r/Berserk subreddit. The blog is a giant comprehensive guide and analysis of the armors and weapons that Guts uses in Berserk. It compares them to the real-life historical inspiration, along with possible fictional inspirations as well. The guide was never finished, and it stopped right before Guts obtained the Berserker armor, so we never got to see that entry unfortunately. But it's still a good tool to see just how much detail Miura put into the story. Starting in 2018, out of Toronto, Canada, Brand of Sacrifice is a deathcore metal band that, even besides the name, takes much inspiration from Berserk. Their debut EP was titled The Interstice, and their debut full album was titled God Hand. Their song Eclipse off of The Interstice is basically just a Berserk song, and it slaps. Go check them out if you're into heavier stuff like this. If we're counting the Lost Chapter 83 as canon, and that the idea of evil exists in the world because of mankind's desires to understand and find reason to their pain, then a similar idea that contrasts this must exist, such as the idea of good. In Chapter 209, we first learn about the 4 kings of the world, who are a group of 4 spirits that reside in the astral world. These 4 spirits love and protect humanity, and are able to be conjured in spells by magic users, like we see with Shirkei when she summons them. If an idea of good exists in Berserk, this is the closest thing we have to it, as nothing else really comes close, as the world of Berserk is so dreadful all the time. This entry refers to something fans pointed out over the years of Berserk's releases. They pointed out that the background characters that have no dialogue are usually super generic looking and share the same boring design in most cases. Fans notice that the women in particular are super generic and have no variety almost. It makes sense as to why this is the case though. Berserk already takes so long to make with this flaw, that if Miura was creating unique designs for each background character that only appeared for a page or so, we probably would be waiting 216 years in between chapter releases. Berserk Warcry is a postcard collection exclusive to Japan that was released in 1998. There's a ton of Miura's artwork on them, with some artwork being original if I'm not mistaken. In Chapter 85, right after Griffith is reborn into Femto, the apostles present in the eclipse start mocking Guts with the corpses of the Band of the Hawk. We can see Pippin and Corcus's body, but not Judo, despite Judo's body being completely intact when we see him die. This theory claims that Judo was shown to Guts and is actually the ripped face in this panel of page 5 of chapter 85. The face sort of resembles Judo a bit, and it's on the same page where the apostles are parading around Corcus and Pippin's body, but other than that, there's no major evidence to support this. This entry refers to a connection between Berserk and the shooting that took place in Annapolis, Maryland on June 28, 2018. The connection between the two is the fact that the man behind the shooting was a big Berserk fan. He even took photos of those who he wanted to hurt, and he edited brand of sacrifices on their foreheads. Many people were worried that some news outlets would scapegoat Berserk into being the cause of the evil behind this incident, but luckily this didn't happen as far as I've seen. This vague entry refers to some of the fans' perception of the subjectively wonky art that's present in some of the earlier chapters of Berserk. It also refers to the perceived decline in art quality from when Miura and Studio Gaga switched to digital art. Miura was very young when he was creating the earlier chapters of Berserk, so it's understandable that it wasn't going to be on the quality of a veteran manga artist. With that being said, I still think that the earlier art looks amazing and even better than peak Miura art at some points. Regarding the supposed decline after Miura and Studio Gaga switched to digital art, I gotta agree, as those first few chapters after they made the switch looked very different, and sometimes blurry at some points. But this is because Miura has stated that they had no idea what they were doing when they switched to digital, and had to take a lot of time to learn it. This is a very old theory that suggests Guts will use the Behelit he received in the Black Swordsman arc by shoving it into his empty eye socket, allowing him to somehow get the upper hand on Griffith and the God Hand. I guess from an outsider perspective, if you looked at Berserk, you see this guy in a fantasy world with an empty eye socket, and he has an egg with multiple eyeballs on it, so why not just try to make something work there? The Behelit Guts has is shown to be like palm size, so just off that alone, I don't think that'll work out. Not only that, but Puck would never let him harm Betsy like that. Kaze64 Berserk is a pretty old YouTube channel known for their motion manga adaptations for Berserk. Kaze64 is claimed to be the first YouTuber to make this genre of videos on the platform, and many Berserk fans who only watched the 97 anime came to his channel looking for an animated continuation of the story. There's still re-uploads if you're interested in checking him out. This entry refers simply to the hope from the community that Berserk will receive a new and proper adaptation from a big studio with a proper budget. A lot of people have come to the conclusion that a lot of the bigger studios are scared to touch Berserk given the darker themes they'd have to animate to give it a proper adaptation. This could also be why the Lost Children arc has never seen an official adaptation, as the themes in that one are arguably the worst in any of Berserk. The studio I've seen thrown around as a dream studio to do Berserk is Mappa Studios, as they've already done some more brutal series like Attack on Titan and Chainsaw Man, and their level of animation could come somewhat close to the original art from Berserk. The Dajjal is an evil figure in Islamic eschatology who serves as an antichrist in Islamic belief. He is described as having one eye and being marked on his forehead with the word kafir, which means unbeliever. With the missing eye and mark on his head, some people believe Miura drew inspiration behind the Dajjal's design for the design of Guts, and maybe Miura was going to initially have Guts be portrayed as a false messiah, but as we know, Miura found someone else to fill that role. Drama CDs, for those unfamiliar, are audio recordings where voice actors act out the script or dialogue of a manga volume that you can listen to as you read through the volume. Sometimes these CDs would have soundtracks to go along with the voice acting, which actually sounds really cool, and I wish more series would put money into making these. In Berserk, there's only one drama CD that exists, and it's for the special edition of Volume 41. The actors from the 2016 anime reprised their roles for the CD, and Casca's voice actors from the 97 anime came back to play some newer characters. 900 God Hands refers to a theory posted first on the SkullKnight.net forums somewhere around 2017. It's a giant insane page theorizing that there's been several God Hand groups in the past leading up to now, and that they must kill each other in their conquest of getting stronger. It states Void is the strongest because he constantly comes out on top and has been around the longest. This theory was made before Chapter 362 released, so these ramblings might actually be true as we see the God Hand flashback and see Void in the past with an entirely different crew of God Hand members. This entry refers to a post that was made in the Berserk subreddit somewhere around mid-2023. The post was a repost of a YouTube short which showed someone revealing their new Berserk tattoo. The tattoo was a full arm sleeve and consisted of the final moments of the eclipse where Griffith Casca. The tattoo was so detailed and even added some more features that weren't even present in the original scene, such as extra fluids and detailed Griffith parts. This means this schmuck went out of his way to ask their tattoo artist to add these extra details in the sleeve. I can't even imagine how that tattoo consultation went down. Was he like, yeah, I know this panel is disturbing enough, but can you please add a pair of balls to Griffith? Permaband West29 LVL was a user who was active on a website where you could read all of Berserk. He was allegedly active on other manga sites as well, but he was most active on this Berserk site. Permaband would leave comments on every single different chapter of Berserk, saying some pretty awful things. He would make racist jokes, assault jokes, jokes involving and a ton more. He would also post dark Berserk memes involving Donovan and Bad Horse. He allegedly would do this on other manga sites as well, and was gaining a fair amount of notoriety before he started to get banned off these sites, along with all of his comments getting deleted as well. This entry is pretty vague, but refers to the vast amounts of NSFW art you can find surrounding Berserk. Whereas some art is very standard and isn't too out of the ordinary given it's fan art for a manga, some art is straight up disturbing and includes art of characters like Sherkei and Isidro. Yeah. In 2017, Miura revealed in an interview that after Animal House, which is the original magazine that published Berserk, closed down, he almost ended Berserk right then and there. Miura was given the option to work on a new project with the creator of Fist of the North Star, who he previously worked with prior to creating Berserk, or he could have tried to have Berserk picked up by another magazine. If Miura chose to end Berserk, the series would have ended right at the end of Volume 3, and as great as I think the Black Swordsman arc was, Berserk probably would have been a long forgotten series by now. In all of the dubs of the 97 anime, including the original Japanese version, Casca is completely silent during the last events of the eclipse while she's with Griffith. However, in the Italian dub, Casca is not silent and is very audible during this scene. This was very strange, as like I mentioned before, no other dubs had Casca being vocal during the scene, and it's strange because during this time, a ton of animes that were aired in Italy were being heavily censored. Technically, this version of the 97 anime is the most accurate though, because in the manga, Casca is shown to be audible during this moment, but like, it's not a necessary thing that had to be added for fans to think the adaptation is faithful. Our final entry refers to the fact that no matter how Berserk's story ends, not everyone is going to be satisfied, and many fans will most likely be upset. Even fans who think the ending is incredible will still be upset simply based on the fact that it was made by Koji Mori and not Kentaro Miura. The thing that worries me the most is not getting the answers to a lot of the things we covered in this iceberg. Questions and theories fans have been discussing for decades now may just not even be explored in this final stretch of the story, and that's heartbreaking. Well, it's not like we have to worry about this one anytime soon. That was the Ultimate Berserk Iceberg Explained. I had a ton of fun covering this one, as Berserk is something I'm super passionate about and wanted to make a video on for a while now. Is there anything important that wasn't on the iceberg? Let me know in the comments. That's all from me today. Thank you all so much for the support on the channel, and have yourselves a damn good one.